Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience, where they felt stuck, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others and finding possibility for yourself. Let's get into this week's conversation. Welcome back for another episode of Off the Comma. Very excited to be here. It is always a privilege to be here each week and to be just part of this amazing community that I feel like I'm, playing a part in building, but this community of storytellers, this community of Off the Comma, and it's always such an honor to be here. This week, I'm with another guest and another powerful story, another amazing human being, John Rennie, who I'm going to let him introduce himself in just a moment. As with so many of my guests, John and I haven't met before. So I am looking forward to meeting John today, learning more about John through his story, and also being able to be witness to the story that he's going to be sharing with all of you and, be able to see, learn a little bit more about John and then also kind of learn a little bit about myself through my reflections on John's story. So I'm very excited about that. And with that, I will quietly hand it over to you, John. So why don't you introduce yourself? Start with how would you like to be known? And then if there's anything else you'd like us to know about you by way of introduction before we get started, that'd be great.
Well, the very first class in our design workshop is called Identity. And in there, we tell people that are Christians that they are children of God. They are God's children, adopted into his family. So for me, I would introduce myself first and foremost as, hi, I'm John Rennie, born again son of the Most High God. I'm a husband of 46 years this summer. I have three kids, or we have three kids, five grandkids. I started a business for ERP, MRP software in the late 80s. And I was happily doing that until 2015-16 when God had a different plan for my life and led me to founding the Brushfires Ministry. So that's me in a nutshell. The cliff
Okay.
notes, if you will.
Nice. I appreciate you sharing that and giving us a little bit of a preview into probably what we anticipate we'll learn about you through your story. John, as you think about kind of like traits to describe you, characteristics, what kind of adjectives, maybe two or three adjectives, would you use to describe yourself beyond the roles that you play?
Well, leadership is something that even when I don't want to be in leadership, I find myself being placed in it. So that is one. I would also say empathetic, a certain amount of compassion for fellow men, and then also just wanting to create unity, to be able to intervene in people's chaos to actually get them to a place where they have peace, where they can
Mm,
experience love, joy, and peace.
nice. Nice. John, one of the things that I do with every guest before we get into your story here in a moment is as you think ahead to the next 40 minutes or so telling your story with us, what would be your intention for yourself today?
Well, really, just to be authentic and to help people to understand that there's more in this life than the commercialism that we're settling for, the worldly goals that we think are going to make us happy, that anything that is contrary to God's intentions in this world, we're supposed to love each other. There's a quote from brother, I forget his name now, sorry. It'll come to me, but Brother Lawrence.
Mm,
And it goes like this: the purpose of the will is to love. So every willful action that we do that is unloving is contrary to God's design. Just
mm,
think about that. So every choice that you make in life that is contrary to what God created you to do is going to create damage to your soul. Every harsh word, every unloving act creates a disunity in your own soul that we call anxiety or depression
mm,
or lack of motivation or whatever you want to call it. It's because it's contrary to what God wants for his children. He wants us to love one another. He wants us to help one another. He wants us to accept one another.
I I already hear messages that I think resonate universally, regardless of your faith or
Right.
your spiritual belief or belief systems. Like, and I'll self-reference and say that in the world that I'm walking in, I'm seeing more and more people who are resonating with this message across all kinds of stripes. And so, I'm inspired by that. And my intention today is to support you in your intention, create a space where you can tell your story. And then there will be people out there who will connect with you. They will see a little bit of themselves in you and your story, feel a little bit less alone, more connected, and in the best of cases, maybe feel inspired or empowered to go out and do something that they've been wanting to do.
That's the point. The name of the ministry is Brush Fires, and it took me a while to figure out um, what the metaphor was that when God gave me that name of the ministry. And the idea is that when you can stoke into a person's life what God created them to do, which is good, which is how do I serve other people? How do I make this world a better place? When you can soak that into them, they actually um, ignite fires in the people that they're ministering to, that they're helping, that they're serving.
Mhm.
And so this is something that's intended to spread. And love and hope and joy are powerful motivators in the human being.
I love it. I love it. John, let's get into your story and see how some of these themes kind of show up and manifest in your experiences. Let me start with the first question of our five today. Where in your life have you found yourself sitting on a comma?
Well, that would be the 2015, 2016 uh, time of my life because of situation with an employee that was beyond my control. At the end of 2015, our software company, which was nearly 30 years old at that point, had its largest, most significant loss. In fact,
Mm,
when I looked in January 2016, it was, I can't sustain this again. And there was no
mm,
promise that was going to reverse. So I cut all expenses, including my salary, so that my employees would still be able to have a job, and so that my clients would not be left without service, at that point. And not knowing if my company was even going to last another 6 months, I had to stop doing sales presentations because it would be unethical for me to sell it to a small
mm,
business a $250,000 software product and then be out of business.
mm,
Also, to be quite honest, I was at a place where I was so sucked dry from running the company for 30 years. I had reinvented it 3 times. And so I was really at this place where spiritually, emotionally, and even physically, I was dying.
mm,
And God intervened. It took me a while to figure out what he was doing. But ultimately, he led me to take training in psychometric assessments, which is a story into itself because at first I told him, no, this makes no sense. What does
mm,
this have to do with programming? What does this have to do with, putting, paying my family's bills? And then it was like this prompting, do it. It's like, this makes no sense, God, do it. I did it. I listened to him and it changed my life.
mm,
It delivered me to an understanding of how to understand my purpose, which happens to be helping other people discover theirs.
mm,
The end of this our program is we do something called a DDM, and the full DDM includes a purpose statement. Mine reads like this: I must strategically lead a gifted team to embrace the power of their God-given design for long-term positive results. It was May of 2017 when I was contemplating that, understanding that a correlation of experiencing love, joy, and peace is being obedient to what you were created to do, that harmony of God's intention in your life. And so I understood that I needed to live that out. I didn't understand how. The first part of that is all about leadership. And that's when I described it to you, that's exactly what, that's the first way I look at myself. I was created to
mm,
be a leader. That middle section, getting people to embrace the power of the God given design. Well, God had already given me an epiphany that these corporate assessments he wanted to use in ministry in the church. So I knew that. And the last part is long term positive results. That's what God is in the business of. He's about delivering the fruit of the Spirit, about changing lives, redeeming lives like mine.
Mm,
But how do I get the church to embrace the power of the God-given design? I have these assessments and I have the training, and I recognize I had a natural aptitude to doing it. And it was like, all right, you're going to write the curriculum. A little of the backstory, and this is all covered in the book Sparks Turn into Brush Fires, which is free. If you simply register our site, we give it away. 2016, going through this really difficult period of my life of losing my identity as a business owner, even though I still own the business today, but losing all that identity, I was writing short stories and poems and
mm,
articles and even a couple of skits and plays. I was writing all these things and it was cathartic. And I was just trying to get this out, trying to understand it and so forth. I didn't realize that God was igniting that part of my abilities to communicate so that when the idea of writing the curriculum came up, it would be like, well, you've been writing now for a year and a half.
mm,
He's already primed the pump. As soon as I made that mental agreement, the name Brushfires Ministry popped in my head. I can't take credit for it. I know I was the first one to speak it out, but it was just, and you're going to call it this.
mm,
It was a couple years before I figured out the imagery behind that name, but now I get it. God wants to change individual lives, and by changing those lives, they will change others' lives.
mm,
Every purpose statement has two commonalities. It begins with I must, which is if God really created you this way, then you don't have a choice. It's if you want to have fulfillment, if you want to have that harmony in your soul, your emotions, your intellect and your free will, you need to do what he created you to do. So that's the I must. The second part is how do you serve other people? Now, if you just took that last part, if everybody's focus when they woke up in the morning is, how am I going to serve Paul? How am I going to serve my wife? How am I going to serve my employees? How am I going to serve my employer? If that was really the motivation of every human being, could you imagine what kind of world we would have?
mm,
That's the
mm,
kind of world that God intended for us to experience. It's not happening, but we can start to push against that darkness that is driving us apart and causing us
mm,
to distrust one another, to walk in shame and guilt. We can
mm.
we can push against that and take back some of that land that has been lost.
Yeah, I want to take a moment and kind of reflect some things that you said because you're kind of ending this part of your story with a little bit of a sort of where you've landed and sort of your calling and purpose, if you will. And I believe I heard, and correct me where I'm wrong anytime I misreflect something. It's almost like two commas that you're describing. There's this comma that you were sitting on with what ended up being sort of not the completion of your business, but a significant downsizing and transition of your business. And then as you moved into this new role that you were called to, then there's the kind of how do I go about implementing this sort of new direction that I'm taking. So I want to stop reflecting there and just kind of let you go where you want to with that. And then we'll jump back in with some more of the questions. But
So one of the things that I've learned, when you come from a business world and you are a owner of a business and so forth, you are the decision maker. Okay, you don't
mhm.
have the luxury of kicking it up the ranks. You are the decision maker. So I was very much accustomed of saying, all right, that's the goal, that's the direction. I'm going to run off and go off in that direction. And to a certain extent, that has been of benefit. But in recent years, I've learned it's actually more in ministry in trying to work these things out. It's more of a hindrance to God's intentions. I
Mm,
shared with you the story about the expectations part of my life in 2024, where I had placed expectations on how God was going to work things out, when He was going to do it, even the hows and the whys and all that. That was me running ahead of God. You can't do what He's created you to do without being in an obedient submission submissive perspective with that, so that he can guide you, tell you when to go left, tell you when to go right. There's a play that's in the book, or it's more of a skit called Get Up, and it's intended to be it's a physical skit where a person is being beat up by the enemy.
Mm.
And there's three people. There's the person that's getting beat up. There is the enemy that's out there that's lurking that they can't fight against. And then there's this inner voice that's telling them to get up. And it's the in the process of the skit, the person learns to listen to that voice. And when he says to duck, you duck. When he says
Mm.
to weave, you weave, and so forth. And it's learning to hear that voice and to be able to actually walk in harmony, in pace with God, not running ahead of him like I do. Other people
Mhm.
might lag behind and not have the faith or vision to be able to move forward. Both are wrong. Both are
Mm.
equally wrong. Okay. Mine, I could actually, if I'm running off in the right direction, I might actually do some good, but I need to learn to walk at God's pace. And so putting aside your expectations of how your life is supposed to end up and trusting that God knows best, that is a huge comma. And that is a lesson that I have to remind myself on a daily, sometimes hourly basis.
What is challenging about that for you? I had several questions I wanted to explore, but let's land on that one right there. You said I have to set aside my expectations. What's challenging about that for you, or how does that present challenges?
Well, it goes against my learned behavior because my learned behavior was if you see an opportunity, you run and you jump at it. If you see a possibility to leverage an asset, you leverage that asset, not outside of doing things, in an honorable, ethical way, but it's your agenda, it's your expectations that you're placing on that. And you can't be obedient to God's call if you are following your agenda. So you have to
Mm.
unlearn that. These are instilled false beliefs that I had in my life that others do too, that you have to identify and begin to rebuke and cast out so that you can actually be in pace with God. So when he tells you to duck, you duck because
Mm.
because whenever you are walking with God and trying to do what it is that he's created you to do, you have intentionally, unwittingly stepped into spiritual warfare. So there are entities that are going to fight against that. They're going to try to discourage you, to knock you off your mark. I'm sure after your first 10 podcasts, it was like, wow, is this, am I making a difference? All those
Hmm.
discouraging voices come in your head. Now, praise to you. You're now 124, I think. I'm the
Yeah.
124th. So good for you. But still, you have to learn to persevere. So understanding that pace of how you're going to walk, that there's going to be resistance, there's friendly fire. I'm in a Christian ministry. I never expected to get pushback and resistance from the church. I have.
Mm. Mm.
Not because of anything that can point to say that you're doing it wrong, but because of basic human selfishness or self-protective or whatever reasons or distrust. That mean I've actually experienced that. So I've got to now give them grace because they're working off of false beliefs just like I have, and they haven't dealt with those yet. And, it's like, all right, I'm not going to burn down the relationship because you acted like a human. You acted
Mm.
like a human because you're human.
Well, and so as you describe that, what I'm kind of taking from that is even though you've kind of talked about these two different types of situations, it seems like the real comma that you work on and maybe continue to work on, I don't know, you tell me, is this element of letting go, trusting God, allowing the process to guide you as opposed to you having to necessarily control the process.
Yeah, it's finding that I guess harmony is really the best word for it because you're
Mm.
still actively doing what it is that you were created to do. So it's not a passive sort of,
Okay.
situation. It's in 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 scripture, and I don't know the exact verse, but Christ talks about, you know, take on my yoke, for I am humble and gentle in nature. Okay. The yoke that he's describing is for two oxen. And so the imagery, whenever you're doing ministry, and ministry is not on stage at church, ministry is what God created you to do. So if you're
It's
working
the
with the
day-to-day
homeless,
actions,
yes,
right?
it's
Yeah.
it's your it's your free will choices about how you're going to invest your life. That yoke that Jesus is describing is for two oxes. So when you put your head into that side of the yoke, you look over to your left, and it's Christ that is there with you.
Mm.
You are in harmony with him. Now he's the one setting the pace. He's the one giving the direction. He's the one doing all that. But you're working alongside Christ. So he does know best. He does know best for your life, for your family's life, for your business. He knows best.
Mm.
And so you are intentionally submitting yourself. I'm writing the book right now called Why Discipleship Isn't Working. And the section I'm currently working on is humility and submission. And as I've been developing this book, I believe it's the number one spiritual discipline that a Christian has to have. They have to be humble and submissive. And those two things are directly aimed at your soul. Your soul is comprised of your emotions, your intellect, and your free will. That's the aspects of the
Mm.
soul. Humility and submission are directly targeting your sense of feelings, your emotions, and your intellect. Those have to be humbled and submitted to God. So when something bad happens, God knows best. I don't know. I don't understand why my friend died. I don't understand why I got into this car accident, but
Hmm.
God knows best. When you're looking at an outcome of this and going, it's impossible. God intellectually understands it better than you do. He's
Mm.
asking you to persevere. Humility and submission are required as spiritual disciplines so that your emotions and intellect do not override God's directions
Mm.
and purposes for your life. Where you say, "Oh, it's too hard."
Mm.
Okay? That's an emotion of fear.
Mhm.
This can never happen. That's because from your perception, you can't see it happening, but God knows how he's going to make it happen. So humility and submission are key elements to be able to walk that out. And
It
that's
it
part of the process.
it strikes me as, I hear talking to many people, both through my profession, my social circles, also through the podcast. I hear many people talk about the concepts of surrender and letting go, kind of in this same kind of spirit, in the same kind of vein, right? This trusting in something bigger. Question for you, because in every episode, people will listen to your story and the things that happen to you, and they'll nod and say, yeah, 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 I get it. I get it. I've seen that. I've heard it, and so forth. And so we all, as humans, make a lot of assumptions, yeah, 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 I get it. I like to say, okay, but wait a minute, let's peel back a layer of the onion and let's learn a little bit more about what that was like for you, John. So, as you talk about humility and submission, what does it take for you within your human shell on a daily basis in order to bring that outcome to yourself? Like, what does it take for you in order to be able to do that?
Well, awareness is one of the first things. You have to understand that these things are tools to create disunity and division.
Hmm.
God does not want us to hate our brothers and sisters, believers or not. He does not want that disunity and that division in this world. And so anything that is promoting that kind of hatred towards another human being, I don't care where you are on the political spectrum, it's on both sides. Anything that promotes that is coming from the enemy. So you need to be aware that every human being is a spiritual creature trapped in a body. You are you are susceptible to influences that come at you at the spirit level. Things that
Mm.
you don't understand, things that you think that you're thinking that are actually, you know, what things that we refer to as intrusive thoughts that are
Hmm.
promoting division and disunity. So your very first thing is awareness. I am a spirit creature in this body, and there are spiritual influences around me trying to get me to do things that are contrary to God's design and will for humanity. So you
Hmm.
need to understand that first. If you are aware of that, when these thoughts pop into your head, you can say, oh, wait a minute, that's not my God who loves me and loves other people. That's the enemy trying to create division here. So you
Hmm.
have to be aware of that, first of all. Second of all, that you then need to understand that as a believer, and this is my belief as a Christian, that you have spiritual authority over those beings, that you can rebuke them and you can ask God to protect you from those thoughts, those temptations, those whatevers. Okay?
Hmm.
Those are the two things that I would start off with. Simply
Yeah.
awareness and authority.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that with us, awareness and authority, and I think about, so many people that I've talked to and even clients that I've worked with, and this they're universal concepts, right? It's like, first of all, being an observer of your thoughts so that you can discern which voices are the true deep inner voices and which ones are the sabotaging voices and so forth, and then being able to intervene, right? Being able to interrupt and intervene against those thoughts without necessarily going into battle, because battle is engagement. Engagement is just basically entertaining the thoughts further, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, so we use the term you identify, you isolate, and you rebuke.
Mm-hmm.
And the rule of thumb is a acronym of ATPII.
Mm-hmm.
If it feels like an accusation, temptation, provocation, intimidation, or insinuation, it's quite likely coming from the enemy. And
Mm-hmm.
you need to identify the source. That's not my dad talking to me. That's not my heart.
Mm-hmm.
You isolate it, you don't entertain it. You will never measure up to anything. You're stupid. People don't like you. All those
Mm-hmm.
self
Yeah.
defeating types of thoughts that come through. God created you to be a beautiful human being. Every purpose statement that I have done over the last nearly 10 years now, I get to see how beautiful that person really was created to be. Even when I didn't like the person,
Mm-hmm.
when my interactions going into the meeting were like, oh, I'm not looking forward to this. Every time I had that attitude, when I was done with the process, I saw how beautiful they were created to be.
Mm-hmm.
The unbeautiful parts are the behaviors that the world has produced by giving them false beliefs. Nobody likes me. Well, if nobody likes me, then I'm just going to treat everybody like blah, you
Mm-hmm.
know? I'm stupid. So, oh, well, then I will always be this sort of, Eeyore type of personality that, I'm just stupid. I just can't do anything. So I might as well just get stoned and sit on the couch all day long. No,
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
belief systems are what are creating the behaviors that God wants to change. So we help people identify those behaviors based upon their design and other attributes that are immutable. And we look at that and we go, these are the belief systems that you have. And that's through mentoring and coaching. That
Mm-hmm.
takes some time to deal with these things. But to help them to actually be able to relieve, rebuke those things, every belief that you have in your life, every belief you believe to be true, even if everybody that knows you would tell you it's a lie.
Yeah. Beliefs. That's like you said, we before we started recording. Like, there's so many things that we could have conversations about, right? But yeah, and that can be, my own, to self-reference a moment. That some of the work that I continue to do is, it can be one of the hardest things for us as humans to look at someone that we might. You haven't said this directly, but someone that we might actually believe is an enemy, and to be able to look past that belief and say it's actually another person who's just as whole and just as worthy as I am, and they're just dealing with something different and
Yep.
that I'm not, right? So, yeah.
Let me give you an example. So when I was going through the psychometric training in 2016-17, I identified the personality traits that would stop me in sales. These are quality assurance managers. These were production managers. These were um, uh, engineered types of personalities, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
identify people with that personality as an individual that's a high refiner, always looking for perfection, analyst, never satisfied, never has enough information to make a decision, or doesn't feel comfortable, and then a value of accuracy and perfection. This was my kryptonite design.
Mm.
And one of the very first meetings, and I don't have time to go into the whole story. Uh, it's actually in that book, that Sparks book. So
Mm-hmm.
it's free. Get it, read it. Um, I ran into the situation where I was doing a design discovery meeting with this woman, and her husband was the advisor. And all of a sudden, as I'm analyzing her for her purpose statement, he's pitching in, and I'm going, "Oh God, no, he's not one of those." And sure enough, as soon as we got done, my wife races the board and starts putting up his design. And it's exactly that. He's 80% refiner, he's 6% analyst, and his number one value is accuracy and perfection. And I was in the middle of doing that DDM, and all of a sudden, this sense of emotion starts coming over me, not because of anything that was said. It was like grief and just pain and anguish. And it's to the point that, when you really start to feel those emotions, your voice starts to crack.
Mm-hmm.
And, my eyes were tearing up, and I'm going, where is this coming from? Because nothing that was said behind me had generated that.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit goes, this is what this man feels every day of his life.
Mm-hmm.
It's his belief system. It was his belief system. And now we had had this antagonistic relationship the entire time, and it hadn't changed. I turned around immediately after getting that word from God, and I looked at the man and I go, "You've been hurt very deeply." Now, you need to understand, Paul, we weren't friends. This is the most time I had ever spent with this man with his last hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And without missing a beat, without getting defensive, he looks at me and he goes, "JR, it was my father. I was never good enough for him."
Mm.
That man was changed because we eradicated that belief system during that process when I showed him who God created him to be and gave
Mm.
him the assurances that if he made a couple of adjustments in his behavior and also believed and took this to God to get it confirmed, that it would change his life. And it literally did.
Mm.
We are all walking around with these false beliefs that make us into monsters, or at least disagreeable individuals.
Mm.
And if we could step back and show you who God created you to be, the beautiful person that God created you to be, and then look at those behaviors and go, what is disconnected here? And find those beliefs that the individual is being motivated by to behave that way, we can actually change lives. And we have
Mm.
changed lives.
Mm. Well, and it sounds like it has changed you as well, because it sounds like you're speaking from your own experience as well.
So one of the other things that I said was unity. When you asked me to describe the three things about me, I am 50% director on the impact style. Directors are motivated to create order out of chaos. When I saw what was happening with that son of God, who was 72 years old, who had been carrying that burden for probably over 70 years,
Mm-hmm.
when I saw it, angered me that a child of God was being treated like that. Same thing that angers me when I work with women that have been abused, or people that have come out of drug rehab or prison. It angers me to see what this world has done to them. That's that
Mm-hmm.
director in me. And it's like, no, if I can do something to stop that chaos, I'm going to do it. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to use the gifts and the authority that God has given me to send this person a lifeline, to let them know that God loves them and has a beautiful plan for their life. They just need to trust Him and follow His specific leading for their life.
Mm. John, let me ask this next question, and you can kind of expand in your story as you need. But when you look back at this comma or these commas that you have been sitting on, what did that create for you?
It changed my life. It literally did. So I'm still not getting a full-time paycheck. I volunteer my time with the ministry. We do not have a donor base because, quite honestly, my pride prevents me from asking for money. So
Mm,
I hate that process. But we had achieved financial success. As I said, I've been married for 46 years, so I've had relationship success. I had a respect of people that I worked with that worked for me. I had a lot of the things that this world promises that are going to make you fulfilled, and I was discontent.
mhm,
When I get to go to battle for one of God's children to redeem them, to show them what it is that God wants to do through their obedience and the beauty that is waiting to be released in them, that empowers me.
mm,
This passion that you see did not exist anymore in 2015. I was
mm,
drained. I I had a company that was nearly 30 years old. It's now approaching 40 years because the company's still going. I've been trying to wind it down for 10 years and the software just keeps on working. So it's getting difficult to get people to transition off of it.
mm,
But I didn't have that joy. I didn't have that passion for what I was doing anymore. What I have now, what God has shown me, is his plans are better than mine. Who knew?
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, you're kind of setting up this next question. You've already really started answering it, I think. But let me ask you so you can clarify. The third question is, what have you learned as a result of sitting on this comma, or maybe what are you continuing to learn?
So a couple things. I just shared this with a pastor in Michigan just a few minutes, and he goes, I never thought of that. And apparently, a lot of people haven't. In Luke chapter 14, I think it's verse 7, Christ says, unless you're willing to pick up your cross and follow me, you can't be your disciple.
Mm,
Okay. Well, I haven't seen a lot of people walk around with crosses. Okay. So obviously, it was a metaphor. But what did he mean? Well, the cross was Christ's purpose. Christ came to earth to pay the price that we could not pay for our sin debt so we can be reconciled to a relationship with our Creator so that we could begin to live the life that He intended for us. That was His purpose. And only He could do that because He was sinless and perfect. But unless you're willing to pick up your cross, well, His purpose for coming to earth was to die on the cross and pay that sin debt. What was Paul's reason for being created and sent to this earth? What was JR's? I can tell you what JR's is. I must strategically lead a gifted team to embrace the power of their God given design for long term positive results. That's my purpose. That's what that's what inspired the Brushfires ministry. That's the whole point of what it is that I've devoted the last 10 years of my life to is that. So
mm,
that's number one. You need to pick up your cross and do what you were created to do if you really want to be a disciple of Christ. The other one is we feed our bodies, we feed it with um, oxygen and water and food. Okay. In
mhm.
fact, some of us, like me, probably overfeed our body. Um, a personal thing that I need to continue to work on. But what about our souls? Earlier on we talked about the most important part of who you are is your soul. That's the part that's eternal. Okay, the part that's least important is our body, and that's the part we pay most attention to. The soul is your intellect, your feelings, and your emotions. This is where depression resides. This is where false beliefs reside. This is where um, discontent. This is where disunity. This is where all those things reside. The fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5:22-23, reads like this. The gifts of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. One thing that God's taught me is the things that are giving us the greatest amount of grief and pain in our souls, our beliefs, our intellect, our feelings can be healed by that fruit. It's the nourishment for the soul. Just like we
Mm,
have nourishment for the body, we have nourishment for the soul. We think we know what love is. We don't.
mm,
We think we know what peace is. We don't. I recently had an experience with peace after giving a message at a retreat. I woke up the next morning and I had this sense of peace, and it just grew and grew and grew. I stopped off for breakfast, asked to be sat outside. The waitress forgot I was out there. 20, 30 minutes later, comes out. Oh, I'm so sorry. My only concern at that point, because I was in this place of peace, was her anxiety about worrying that I was going to be upset and yell at her. That
mm,
was my reaction. It wasn't like I'm upset. It was like, oh, no, no, hey, it's all good. I walked out of that restaurant and God showed me this is the best version of you.
mm,
That sense of peace lasted 4 hours that morning.
mm,
I have never experienced anything like it, but I want more of it. So,
mm, mm,
that fruit of the spirit, love, joy, peace. Who doesn't want love, joy, and peace? Who isn't a better human being if they have patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness? And all of us need self control. We need to
mm,
regulate our behaviors, we need to regulate our thoughts, we need to regulate our actions. So those are
mm.
the two main things. Pick up your
Yeah.
cross if you're a believer. If you really want to be a disciple, figure out what God created you to do. And the healing nourishment that you need for your soul is the fruit of the Spirit, which is delivered to you by being obedient to God's call in your life.
Mm. I want to ask the fourth question. I believe you've already answered it in a number of ways, but I want to see what else you would add, and that is, what has changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma?
Passion again, purpose, um, the fruit of the Spirit.
Mm,
That encounter with peace changed how I looked at that and allowed me to recognize that I don't even know what those things look like, um, or at least I hadn't experienced them to the degree needed. And
mm,
hope that we can make this world a better place if the church begins to become what God created it to be. It's looking more and more like a business in North America, and God never intended that. In this
mm,
book, "Why Discipleship Isn't Working," that I'm writing right now, I quip that if Paul was alive today, that the American church should be expecting a scathing letter.
mm,
If you want to read the book of Corinthians, you will see how displeased Paul was with what was going on in the Corinthian church, and we are due a letter.
mm,
Um, and and yet, if we go back to the two mandates that Christ gave before he left, it's the last two words: go out in all the world and make and share this gospel. Okay, to some degree, we're doing that and make disciples. Share the
mm,
gospel, make disciples. Well, we just discussed you're not a disciple unless you're carrying your cross, you're doing what you were created to
mm.
do. So, how many believers are actually doing what they were created to do? I
Yeah.
would say less than 5%, 10% at the most.
It's interesting because it also begs the question, and I want to be clear, I'm not sharing this in the spirit of critiquing or placing judgment or anything like that. Those could be different conversations, but if you're sharing the gospel and you're not building disciples, then you have to go back and question how you're sharing the gospel, right? I mean, this holds true, change the examples. This holds true in life, right? If my goal is to go out and spread something and it is not spreading, then one of the things I have to look at is the thing I'm trying to spread, right? And
Right.
what is my approach?
What is it what is motivating an individual to share the gospel? Is it love for that person? Is it for their betterment? Is
Mm.
it because you want them to have a healthy relationship with their creator? Those are all good motivations.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. The evangelist is not the teacher necessarily. The evangelist is not the prophet. The evangelist is oftentimes not even the pastor or
Mm.
the apostle. These are all different roles. We should all be ready to give a defense for our faith as believers. We're told to do that, and I have been part of leading people to salvation. I've played that. That's not my heart. That's not
Hmm.
my purpose. My job is to um, get the church moving into the reasons why God created it, to um, and get it to engage with people and actually produce real disciples. That's not something that you can simply put off to a program. It
Mm.
requires another mature believer to sit down with a new believer or a less mature believer and go, let's talk about where you are in your walk. You
Hmm.
know, here are the core truths of our faith. Do you actually believe this? Can you tell me what they mean? What are the disciplines? Are you actually spending time with God?
Mm.
Are you approaching him in humility and submission so that when he speaks to you with through the Bible, you put aside your intellect, your beliefs, and your emotions, and you go, "This is the word of God. It trumps everything that I want to believe. It is the authority in this area
Mm.
of sin or whatever it happens to be
Hmm.
that you're addressing." So this takes time. This takes an intentional investment of one believer into another believer's life. And
Hmm.
that's how you create disciples. One of the
Mm.
most tragic things, and I shared this with that pastor from Michigan just an hour or so ago, was we are selling a cheap form of salvation potentially in churches where people make an emotional plea because of guilt or shame or whatever it is that we've provoked. And they go, yes, I need a savior. And then we don't walk them out. Then
Mm.
we don't disciple them. And so that could be the only time that they're in that church. And they walk out there and go, well, that's done. My sins are forgiven. I'm all good. And is Christ going to say to them, depart from me, I never knew you?
Mm.
Well, the burden on that is that church. The
Mm.
church needs to say, all right, now that you've made this decision, okay, to make sure that you understood what you just agreed to, here is a teacher that we want you to go to his class. Here is some materials that we want you to read, and we're going to meet with you in a month to go over those materials. Let's have a talk about, your spiritual disciplines and your personal disciplines. Let's talk about these things. These are the core truths of our faith. Do you agree with them?
Mm.
Do you think that Christ was just a good prophet and, and an average Joe that just happened to be a little bit better than you? Or do you believe that he was God here on earth?
Mm.
I mean, these are really consequential choices that a person has to make. And until you are assured that they agree with that, you have not made a disciple.
Mm.
All you've done is inoculated them against the gospel because they walk out there going, well, all my sins are forgiven and I can just do now whatever I want. And if I continue to do bad things, then I'll just ask for forgiveness because Christ died for me on the cross.
Mm. Mm.
Okay? If there isn't any change in the person's life and nobody is there to demonstrate or to measure that change and to actually witness it, have they really received the gospel?
Mm. Mm.
Do they know what they agreed to, what they thought they agreed to? So,
Mhm.
yeah.
I just want to acknowledge you because, as we talked about those last two questions, what have you learned and what has changed? What I can see is, a depth of passion and a depth of belief that is clearly guiding you to this day. So I definitely see that.
Well, and this continues to grow as God has so much that he wants to say to his children. Okay. If if your days are filled with, dope and drinking and so forth, he can't really go into deep theological things about carrying your cross, okay?
Mm-hmm.
He needs you to get at least clear thinking enough so that you might be able to hear duck before you get hit by the 2x4 that is coming your way because of the consequences of your actions.
Mm-hmm.
We have This is a process that a believer has to go through. There's certain things that you have to eliminate out of your life because they are barriers. They are chains that are enslaving you to this world and to the world system. You have to remove these obviously sinful areas. You'll never be sinless. None
Mm-hmm.
of us are. I tell in the books, my book that I just released today, actually, Sparks Turn into Brush Fires. Early on in the book, I share something, and my editor had laughed out loud when she read it. I go, "Oh, please don't be disappointed in me yet. I've got so much more for you to be disappointed in me later on. So keep
Yeah.
on reading because there's more to come for you to be disappointed in who I am as a human being."
Mm.
So all of us are sin-falled creatures. The question is, are you still able to hear from God, and do you still desire to hear from God?
Mm.
If that's still the case, then he can use you and work through you.
Mm. John, last question briefly. What does getting off the comma look like for you?
I don't think I'm off. Dude, this
Mm.
is this has changed my life. I've had people that have gone through our program who have had prophetic words that this is going to go worldwide. I had prophets pick me out of crowd saying, "You think that your best days are behind you. I see you speaking in front of the the marketplace, businesses, academia. I see you speaking throughout all the world." This is early on in the ministry.
Mm.
God is not done using this flawed vessel to figure out some basic truths and to be able to explain it in a way that his children can understand and follow.
Mm.
So I'm going to ride this out. If people read my book, in 2001, I had a dream about Christ returning him in my lifetime. So I don't see this comma ending until he calls me back home.
Mm.
Read the book. You can decide for yourself if I'm completely insane. But it's all in that book.
Mm. John, as we bring your story to a close today, which of course we just got a small snapshot today, this is just a small glimpse into the robust world of who you are as a person. For people who want to maybe connect with you, learn more, hear more, I'll put all the links in the show notes. Where can people find you? What are your socials and so forth?
So brushfires-digital.com is our website. We have a Facebook group, Brushfires Discovering Your Divine Design. It's a public group. I'm on LinkedIn. Uh, when we have a marketing effort when we actually have those funds to be able to afford a marketing effort, I'm sure we'll eventually be on TikTok and all those other things, but we're not currently. Our Instagram presence is really pitiful, only because I don't have the time to manage all those things, and
I get it.
I need people to do it. So brushfires-digital.com. Make sure you're at that site. We actually have an older site that doesn't have our teaching stuff on it. So make sure you go to that site. But yeah, my contact information, my email, my phone number, all that's on there. And we were looking for leaders, elders, coaches, counselors, so that we can train them on how to understand design and how to help the people that they serve discover
Mm-hmm.
their purpose. God's in the business of multiplying. His very first words to Adam and Eve as he's kicking them out of the garden: go forth and multiply.
Mm. All right.
Same thing is true about us today.
Okay. Well, people can learn more at your website, like you said, and then the socials that you are on. last thing before we wrap up is a section I like to call acknowledgments, because obviously you being here, all of my guests on every episode being here is about giving people a platform to share their stories, lifting up voices. Your story wouldn't be complete if we didn't give you an opportunity to do that for others. And so this is your opportunity to lift up, give a voice to, boost other organizations, causes, creators, or just people in your life who are important to you. So who would you like to acknowledge today? And I'll be sure to put their references in the show notes.
So Tina and Mike Green, they were in the very first workshop in February 2018. Whenever you're starting something new, you need to be encouraged because there's a lot of doubt. Am I doing the right thing? Those two have been an encouragement in my life and the minister's life ever since 2018. Another one would be Kiersey and Colton Hoffman from the Hoffman Media Group. I would encourage people to reach out to them. They have helped us in numerous ways of being able to understand ways to get our message out. Kiersey was um, the creative genius behind our video series that is the design workshop. Countless hours devoted to getting that project all for free. She devoted all her time. Not a
Mm,
single penny was required of our ministry. So, and then mostly my wife Buffy
mm,
started a software company in the '80s. She believed in me and supported me and supported the family through all that. When I was prompted to take that psychometric training for 9 months, I said, "Would you do this with me?" Really important that I did. She agreed to do it. She has helped our ministry in countless ways. She does the accounting for my software company. It's- other than accepting Christ as a 12-year-old boy, the next most important decision I ever made was to marry my wife.
mm,
The circumstances behind that are also described in the book. Part of the,
mm.
if you want to be disappointed in me, you can read on further.
Well, we'll leave something for people to go hunting for, right?
Yes.
Clearly, she's very important to you, as are these other folks that you've acknowledged. So, John, I just want to thank you for coming this week and sharing your story with us, and giving us a glimpse into what getting off the comma was like for you. And wish you all the best and a happy weekend ahead.
Paul, this has been a real pleasure. You are probably one of the best podcasts that I've been on
Mm,
in the last 2 months. You are a joy to speak with. There are things that came out of this interview that I've never talked about in
mm.
any other interview that I've done. So this has been a real joy for me. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored, and thank you very much for that acknowledgement. It tells me I'm doing the right things here, which is what my intention was. So I appreciate
Perfect.
that. Have a wonderful weekend. What an honor it is for me to hear and share these powerful stories. I hope you feel the same way. Think about what you learned from this conversation. I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling or reflection, because surprises can reveal themselves to you when you write your thoughts down. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. And if you do discover something you'd like to unpack further, book a call with me and let's talk about it. My links are in the show notes. Be sure to like this episode and follow the podcast here on this platform and all social media at Off the Comma. Feel free to interact and comment. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. As always, keep noticing and keep listening.